If you like love stories with unexpected twists, subscribe and join me every week. That afternoon, as Eleanor measured the windows of the main hall, she heard a voice behind her that made her tremble. Daniel, the man she had silently fallen in love with since she was 11, was now telling her, with an intense look, that he could no longer pretend he didn't know her. Hello. Before continuing with this story, tell me in the comments, where are you listening to me from? I love imagining what country or city you're joining me from today. Now, let's get back to this story that's about to open many wounds, and perhaps even hearts. Eleanor Williams was 23 years old when her life changed forever. She worked at a small interior design firm called Creative Spaces, a modest place where she coped with limited budget projects and clients, who often didn't value her talent. But Eleanor had a special gift for transforming ordinary spaces into extraordinary places. With a sensitivity that went beyond colors and textures, that March morning, her boss Margaret walked into the office with an expression Eleanor had never seen before. A mix of nervousness and excitement that made every employee look up from their desks. Ladies, I have news that will change everything for this company. We've just been contacted about a project I never imagined would come our way. Daniel Blackwood's personal secretary, the billionaire from Blackwood Enterprises, has hired us to completely redesign his new mansion. Eleanor felt the air escape from her lungs. Daniel Blackwood, that name she had held in her heart for so many years, that face that appeared in her most secret dreams, her older brother Thomas's best friend, the man who had been her first impossible love, her teenage fantasy that she never dared to confess to anyone. Margaret continued talking, but Eleanor no longer heard the words. Her mind traveled back 12 years to when she was a shy 11-year-old girl who hid behind gates to watch Daniel when he came home to study with Thomas. She remembered his large, sure hands when he helped her once she fell off her bike, his kind smile when he found her reading in the garden, the way his eyes crinkled when she laughed with her brother. Daniel had been her first crush, the impossible standard against which she compared every man she met afterward. Now, at 35, he had become one of the city's most successful businessmen, with a real estate empire spanning 3 states. Eleanor, you'll be the primary person in charge of this project, Margaret said, bringing her back to her memories. I need you to start tomorrow. Mr. Blackwood wants the work completed in 6 weeks. That night, Eleanor arrived home to her small downtown apartment with a knot in her stomach. Her boyfriend Marcus was waiting for her on the couch, wearing that annoyed expression she'd learned to recognize and fear. "Where were you?" he asked without standing up, without even greeting her. His tone was cold, accusatory, as if she'd committed a crime by being 30 minutes late. "At work, Marcus, I have a very important new project," Eleanor replied, taking off her shoes, tired of these repeated conversations every day. Marcus stood abruptly, approaching her with that look that made her feel small and insignificant. "More important than me? More important than us. It's always the same with you, Eleanor. Everything is more important than our relationship." Eleanor had learned not to respond when Marcus got like this. In the 2 years they'd been together, she'd understood that anything she said would only make things worse. Marcus had a knack for turning any achievement of hers into a problem, any joy into a threat to their relationship. That night, lying next to Marcus, who was fast asleep after spending another hour berating him for his supposed lack of commitment, Eleanor stared at the ceiling, wondering why she had allowed her life to turn into this. At 23, she had never experienced physical intimacy with anyone, not because she was religious or had irrational fears, but because she had never felt safe enough, loved enough, to take that momentous step. With Marcus, every time they approached that moment, something inside her would shut down. Her body would tense, her mind would fill with doubt. He would interpret this as rejection and react with more reproaches, creating a vicious cycle that drove them further and further apart. The next day, Eleanor dressed with special care. She chose a navy blue dress that highlighted her green eyes and styled her hair in an elegant yet natural way. She didn't want to admit she was dressing up for Daniel, but she knew that's exactly what she was doing. Daniel's mansion was located on the outskirts of the city, in an exclusive area where every house looked like a palace. When Eleanor arrived, she couldn't help but gasp. The building was breathtaking, a perfect blend of classical architecture and modern design, with gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. Daniel's secretary, an older man named Robert, greeted her at the front entrance, He was friendly but professional, explaining that Mr. Blackwood was in meetings all morning but would stop by the house at noon to learn about the progress. Eleanor immediately began working, measuring spaces, taking photographs, making notes about natural light and the flow of the rooms. Every corner of that house spoke to her, whispering ideas about how it could be transformed into something even more extraordinary. She was in the main hall, up a small ladder measuring the height of the windows, when she heard footsteps behind her. At first, she thought it was Robert, but something about the sound of those footsteps, the energy that filled the space, let her know it was him. Eleanor said a deep voice she immediately recognized, although now it had a more mature, more self-assured tone. She stood motionless on the stairs, holding the meter, not daring to turn around. Her heart was beating so loudly, she was sure he could hear it. "Come down from there, please. You make me nervous seeing you on those stairs." Eleanor managed to get down without stumbling, though her legs were slightly shaky. When she finally turned around to face him, she felt as if time had stopped. Daniel was still incredibly handsome, but there was something else about him now. A presence, an authority he didn't have when he was her brother's friend. His dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her blush, but there was something else in that gaze, a recognition he tried to hide. "Nice to meet you. I'm Daniel Blackwood," he said, extending his hand. Although Eleanor noticed an almost imperceptible pause before saying her name, "Eleanor Williams," she replied, feeling an electric shock when their hands touched. From creative spaces, Daniel held the contact for a second longer than necessary, his eyes never leaving hers. "Tell me about your vision for the house." For the next hour, Eleanor shared her preliminary ideas with him, discussing how she wanted to create spaces that were elegant yet warm, sophisticated yet inviting. Daniel listened with an attentiveness that unnerved her, but also excited her. He asked intelligent questions and showed genuine interest in her ideas. What Eleanor didn't know was that Daniel had recognized her from the moment he saw her. The shy, green-eyed girl who used to hide when he visited Thomas had grown into a beautiful and talented woman. He remembered perfectly how she had looked at him as a teenager, with that innocent adoration he had found endearing yet Now, seeing her as the woman she had become, Daniel was confused by the feelings she stirred in him. He had decided not to mention that he remembered her, at least not immediately. He wanted to see who she was now, without the burden of her family's past. The following days established a routine. Eleanor arrived early in the morning and worked until dusk. Daniel appeared at various times, sometimes to check on progress, sometimes simply to chat. Their conversations ran longer than professionally necessary, touching on topics ranging from design to life philosophy. Eleanor looked forward to these encounters with an anxiety she'd never felt before. The way Daniel looked at her, as if he truly saw her, as if her opinions mattered, was completely different from any attention she'd ever received from Marcus. But the afternoons brought a less pleasant reality. Marcus had developed a habit of picking her up from work, and when he discovered her project required longer hours, his complaints intensified. One afternoon, Eleanor was organizing fabric swatches in the living room when she heard the familiar sound of Marcus's car outside. Her stomach immediately tightened. She'd lost track of time while working and knew Marcus had been waiting longer than she considered acceptable. When she left the house, the expression on Marcus's face confirmed her worst fears. He was furious, with that cold fury that was worse than screaming. "Get in the car right now," he said without even greeting her, his voice sharp as a knife. "Marcus, I can explain," Eleanor began, but he interrupted her. "I don't want any explanations. Get in the car. You're 2 hours late and you didn't even have the courtesy to call me." Eleanor felt all the apologies she'd prepared vanish. She walked toward the car with her shoulders slumped, feeling small and embarrassed, when a voice behind her stopped her. "Eleanor." They both turned to see Daniel coming out of the house. He was impeccably dressed in a gray suit that flattered his athletic figure, and there was something about his posture that radiated quiet authority. "Sorry to interrupt, but we haven't finished reviewing the plans for the second floor yet," Daniel said, approaching with confident steps. Marcus got out of the car, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "And you are Daniel Blackwood?" Daniel replied, extending his hand, but his attention was clearly focused on Eleanor. "I'm the owner of the house." Eleanor immediately noticed the change in Marcus's attitude. His posture softened slightly, though the resentment remained. It was obvious he recognized the name and the power it represented. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Marcus, Eleanor's boyfriend." I was waiting for her to go to dinner. Of course, Daniel said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But I'm afraid the job isn't done yet. Eleanor, do you have a few more minutes? Eleanor found herself in an impossible situation. She could see the fury growing in Marcus's eyes, but she also felt the protectiveness implicit in Daniel's question. For the first time in a long time, someone was asking her what she wanted to do. Of course, he replied more firmly than he felt capable of. We can finish this quickly. Marcus clenched his fists, clearly struggling between his desire to make a scene and his intimidation of Daniel. Finally, he settled on a forced smile. I'll wait in the car, he said, his tone threatening despite the polite words. As he headed back to the car, Daniel gently placed his hand on Eleanor's shoulder. That simple gesture reassured her in a way she hadn't expected. Once Marcus was out of earshot, Daniel leaned closer to Eleanor. His voice was low but intense when he spoke. Eleanor, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. She looked at him, confused but expectant. Does that man hurt you? The question took her by surprise. Not physically, she answered quickly, though she realized the question itself revealed more than she had intended. That wasn't my question, Daniel said softly. I was asking if it hurts you. Eleanor felt tears well up in her eyes. No one had ever asked her that question before. No one had noticed the invisible wounds Marcus inflicted on her day after day with his constant nagging. His way of making her feel guilty about everything. Started, but couldn't continue. Daniel reached up with his free hand and gently touched her cheek, wiping away a tear that had begun to fall. Eleanor Williams, he said her full name with a tenderness that made her tremble. You were always the sweetest, shyest little girl I met when I visited your brother Thomas. And that sweetness is still there, but now I can see that someone has been trying to extinguish that light you always had. Eleanor felt her world shake. He remembered her. He'd been pretending not to know her, but he remembered her perfectly. Since when did you know who I was? He asked, his voice breaking. From the moment I saw you on that staircase, Daniel admitted, but I wanted to meet the woman you'd become, not just my friend's little sister. Their eyes met, and Eleanor felt a connection she'd never experienced before. It was as if Daniel could see directly into her soul, into the part of her she'd kept hidden for so many years. Your brother Thomas would be furious if he knew someone was treating you that way, Daniel continued, his voice growing firmer. You should value yourself more, Eleanor. Don't let any man treat you as if you were less than you are. But before Eleanor could respond, Marcus impatiently honked the car horn, breaking the intimate moment. Go, Daniel said softly, but never forget what you just said. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Daniel's words echoed in her mind over and over again. For the first time in years, someone had truly seen her, acknowledged her pain, and told her she deserved better. Marcus had been particularly cruel during dinner, accusing her of flirting with her boss, of using work as an excuse to avoid committing to their relationship. Every word was like a stab, designed to make her feel guilty and small. But this time, something was different. Instead of absorbing the guilt as she always did, Eleanor found herself remembering Daniel's protective gaze, the firmness in his voice when he told her to value herself more. The following days were a sweet torture. Eleanor found herself anticipating every encounter with Daniel, every conversation that extended beyond the professional. He had started bringing her coffee in the mornings, a simple gesture that made her feel cared for in a way Marcus never had. One afternoon, while Eleanor was selecting curtains for the master bedroom, Daniel entered the room with a more serious expression than usual. Eleanor, I need to tell you something, he said, closing the door behind him. She put down the fabric swatches and walked over to him, noticing the tension in his shoulders. I got a call from Thomas yesterday, Daniel began, and Eleanor felt her heart skip a beat. He told me you're seeing someone who worries him. Apparently, your brother has noticed changes in you in recent months. Eleanor felt a mixture of shame and panic. Had Thomas noticed how Marcus was affecting her? Daniel leaned closer, his voice becoming more intimate. He asked me to look after you while you work here. He doesn't know you're my designer, but he asked me to intervene if I ever found you in a difficult situation. What did you say to him? Eleanor asked, her voice shaking. I told him I'd do everything in my power to make sure you were safe, Daniel replied, moving even closer. But Eleanor, I can't keep pretending this is just about your brother. Eleanor felt the air in the room thicken. The way Daniel looked at her had changed, becoming more intense, more personal. "What do you mean?" Daniel took her hands in his, a gesture that sent waves of heat throughout Eleanor's body. "I mean, 12 years ago when you were 11, I already knew that one day you would become an extraordinary woman. But I never imagined that when that day came, I would feel this way." "Feel what?" Eleanor whispered, though her heart already knew the answer. "That I would fall in love with you," Daniel said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The silence that followed was intense, filled with years of unspoken feelings. Eleanor felt like all her teenage fantasies were coming to life in the most unexpected way. "Daniel," he murmured, not knowing what else to say. He raised a hand to touch her face, his fingers tracing the line of her cheek with a tenderness that made her tremble. "I know it's complicated. I know you're with someone else, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way. Every day you come here, every conversation we have, every smile you give me, I fall a little more in love with the incredible woman you've become." Eleanor felt tears begin to well up in her eyes. But this time they weren't tears of sadness, but of such intense emotion that she didn't know how to handle it. "Me too," she finally admitted. "Ever since I was a child, you've always been my unattainable ideal. I never thought that one day you'd fall in love with you," Daniel added with a tender smile. "Well, here we are." He moved even closer, until Eleanor could feel the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne mingling with something that was uniquely him. "Eleanor," he whispered, "can I kiss you?" The question, asked with such respect and tenderness, was like a balm to Eleanor's wounded soul. For 2 years, Marcus had never asked if he could kiss her. He just did it whenever he wanted, however he wanted, without considering whether she was ready or desired the contact. "Yes," he replied in a voice he barely recognized as his own. When Daniel's lips touched hers, Eleanor felt the whole world disappear around her. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, as if Daniel were savoring every second. But when Eleanor responded, when she allowed herself to melt against him, the kiss deepened with a passion that had been suppressed for years. Her hands found their way to Daniel's neck, feeling the strength of his muscles beneath the fabric of his shirt. He pulled her closer, his arms surrounding her as if he wanted to protect her from the world. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Daniel leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "Eleanor," he murmured, "you are more than I dreamed of all these years." "Did you dream about me?" she asked, surprised. Daniel laughed softly. "Do you think I didn't notice the way you looked at me when I came to visit Thomas? You were so tender, so pure in your adoration. I was flattered, but I knew you were too young, too innocent. I never imagined that years later, when I found you again, you would be the one with the power to completely disarm me." Eleanor felt a warmth spread throughout her body, a feeling of completeness she had never experienced. But reality set in when they heard the sound of a car outside. Marcus had arrived. Eleanor pulled away from Daniel immediately, panic replacing the euphoria of the previous moment. "He can't see us like this," she said quickly, fixing her hair and clothes. Daniel nodded, but before she could leave the room, he gently took her arm. "Eleanor, this isn't over. I can't pretend this didn't happen, and I'm not going to let you stay in a relationship that hurts you." But before he could answer, they heard Marcus's impatient voice from outside. "Eleanor, where are you?" That night was particularly difficult. Marcus had been especially possessive during dinner, making comments about how much time I spent at Daniel's house, implying that something inappropriate was going on. "You always come home different when you come from that place," Marcus told her as he undressed for bed. "There's something about you I don't like." Eleanor, lying in bed pretending to read a magazine, felt her body tense at the accusation. "I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus. It's just work." Marcus approached the bed, his gaze scrutinizing her in a way that made her feel naked and vulnerable, but not in the pleasant way she had felt with Daniel that afternoon. "Is it just work when you come home with that dreamy expression? Is it just work when you suddenly don't want to be touched?" It was true. Ever since Daniel had kissed her, ever since she had experienced what it was like to be with someone who truly desired her, contact with Marcus had become even more unpleasant than it already was. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, his weight causing the mattress to dip in a way that made Eleanor instinctively move away. "Maybe it's time we took our relationship to the next level," he said in that voice he used when he wanted to sound romantic but only made Eleanor feel pressured. "Marcus, we've talked about this," Eleanor replied, trying to remain calm. I'm not ready yet. When are you going to be ready, Eleanor? We've been together for 2 years. It's ridiculous that a 23-year-old woman still acts like a scared little girl. Marcus's words were like a slap in the face, but this time, instead of absorbing the humiliation as she always did, Eleanor found herself comparing his attitude to the tenderness Daniel had shown that afternoon. The difference was stark. "I'm not a scared little girl," Eleanor said, more firmly than she had shown in a long time. "I just think intimacy should come naturally when both people feel connected and safe." Marcus laughed unpleasantly. "Connected and secure. Where did you get that romantic garbage? This is the real world, Eleanor. Adult relationships require adult commitments." Eleanor felt something inside her snap. For 2 years, she'd believed the problem was her, that she was too demanding, too romantic, too immature. But now, after experiencing, even for a moment, what it was like to feel desired and respected at the same time, she realized Marcus was completely wrong. "I think we should talk about this another time," Eleanor said, turning away to avoid continuing the conversation. But Marcus wasn't about to let the subject drop. He leaned closer, trying to kiss her, his hands beginning to explore her body in a way that made her feel invaded. "Marcus, no," Eleanor said, pushing him gently but firmly. He stopped, but his expression turned dangerous. "No. Now it turns out I can't even touch my own girlfriend." "It's not that, Marcus. It's just ... It's just that what? You'd rather fantasize about your millionaire boss?" The accusation was so precise that Eleanor felt her breath catch in her throat. How could Marcus have known what had happened that afternoon? "I don't know what you're talking about," he lied, but his voice sounded less convincing than he expected. Marcus abruptly got out of bed, clearly frustrated. "You know what, Eleanor? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of having a girlfriend who acts like physical contact is a punishment. I'm tired of being the bad guy for wanting a normal relationship." With those words, Marcus grabbed his pillow and headed to the living room couch, leaving Eleanor alone in bed with her tumultuous thoughts. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Her mind alternated between the memory of Daniel's kiss and the guilt she felt for betraying Marcus. But more than anything, she was confused by the intensity of what she had felt with Daniel. For the first time in her life, she had experienced real desire, the connection she had been waiting for so long. The next day, Eleanor arrived at work earlier than usual, hoping to have time to clear her mind before confronting Daniel. But he was already there, waiting for her with 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said in that deep voice that now had the power to make her heart race. "Good morning, Daniel," she replied, accepting the coffee but avoiding his gaze. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, and there was something in his tone that let her know he really cared about the answer. "Not very well," Eleanor admitted, finally looking up to meet his eyes. Daniel approached, but kept a respectful distance. "Was it because of what happened yesterday? Do you regret it?" Eleanor felt her heart break a little at the vulnerability she detected in his voice. "No, I don't regret it. It's just ... complicated." "I know it's complicated," Daniel said gently. "But, Eleanor, I need you to know that I don't mean to pressure you or make your life any more complicated than it already is." He took a step closer, his voice becoming more intimate. "But I also need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It's not a fling, it's not curiosity, it's not nostalgia for the past. It's love. Eleanor, I love you as the woman you are now." Eleanor felt tears well up in her eyes. No one had ever told her they loved her that way before. With that conviction, that certainty, "Daniel," she whispered, "I have feelings for you too." But, is he afraid of you?" Daniel added, and the precision of his observation surprised her. "How do you know?" "Because I know those kinds of relationships, Eleanor. I've seen what they do to women, how they convince them they're the ones who are wrong, that they're too demanding, too complicated." Daniel leaned closer, lifting his hand to gently touch her cheek. "But you're not complicated, Eleanor. You're a woman who knows her worth, even if he's made you doubt it." At that moment, Daniel did something Marcus had never done before. Instead of pressuring her to make a decision, he simply hugged her. He held her against his chest, allowing her to feel his warmth, his strength, without expecting anything in return. Eleanor allowed herself to melt into his arms, feeling for the first time in years what it was like to feel truly safe with a man. "You don't have to make any decisions now," Daniel whispered in her ear. "I just want you to know that when you're ready, when you have the courage to choose the life you truly deserve, I'll be here waiting for you." The next 2 weeks were an emotional roller coaster for Eleanor. During the day, she worked at Daniel's house, and their encounters became increasingly intimate, though always respectful. He brought her flowers from the garden, small gestures that made her feel special. He told her stories of his business trips, but also of his deepest dreams, of how he wanted to build something more than a financial empire. Eleanor found herself sharing things with Daniel she'd never shared with anyone before. She told him about her dreams of having her own design firm, about how she wanted to create spaces that healed people, that gave them peace. Daniel listened to every word as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. One afternoon, while Eleanor was hanging some curtains in Daniel's study, he came in with a small box wrapped in gold paper. "I have something for you," he said, with a smile that made Eleanor's heart race. "Daniel, you shouldn't. Open it," he interrupted her gently. Inside the box was a small, delicate, and beautiful golden key pendant, set with tiny diamonds that sparkled like stars. "It's beautiful," Eleanor murmured, touching the jewel reverently. "The key represents possibilities," Daniel explained, reaching out to take the necklace from her. "It represents the power to open new doors, to choose your own path." With gentle hands, Daniel stood behind her and slipped the necklace on his fingers, brushed the skin of her neck as he closed the clasp, sending shivers down Eleanor's spine. "Perfect," Daniel murmured, his lips dangerously close to her ear. Eleanor turned to look at him, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. This time, she was the one who approached first, who raised her face, seeking his lips. The second kiss was different from the first. There was more urgency, more passion, as if they had both been holding back for days. Daniel's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, while Eleanor's tangled in her hair. "I love you, Eleanor," Daniel murmured against her lips. "I love you more than I thought possible." "I love you too," Eleanor replied, the words coming from her heart, unfiltered. "I've loved you since I was 11, and I love you now more than ever." But their moment was interrupted by the ringing of a phone. It was Eleanor's, and when she saw Marcus's name on the screen, reality hit her like a cold wave. "I have to answer," she said in a shaky voice, moving away from Daniel. The conversation with Marcus was tense. He was furious that Eleanor hadn't arrived home at the promised time, and his reproaches became increasingly cruel. Daniel could hear Marcus's aggressive voice through the phone, and his expression darkened with each word. When Eleanor hung up, she had tears in her eyes. "You can't go on like this," Daniel told her firmly. "You can't keep letting him treat you like that. It's not that easy, Daniel. We've been together for 2 years. I've built my life around him." "What life?" Daniel asked with an intensity that surprised her. "A life where you walk in fear. A life where you apologize for following your dreams. Is that what you call life?" Eleanor sat in one of the study chairs, feeling overwhelmed. Daniel knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Eleanor, look at me," he said softly. His voice became more tender, more vulnerable. "When you were a child, you used to sit in your front yard reading. I would watch you sometimes, and there was something about you, a light, a pure joy that radiated from you. That light is still there, but it's fading. Don't let him extinguish it completely." Daniel's words touched something deep in Eleanor's heart. She remembered those days in the garden, remembered how free and happy she felt. When had she lost that feeling? "But I'm scared," Eleanor admitted, her voice cracking. "What if I make the wrong decision? What if I leave Marcus and you realize I'm not what you expected?" Daniel stood up and helped her to her feet, looking directly into her eyes. "Eleanor," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I've waited 24 years to find the woman who makes me feel complete. Since I saw you again, I know with absolute certainty that it's you. It's not a fantasy. It's not nostalgia. You are the woman of my dreams come true." He kissed her again, but this time with a tenderness that broke through all of Eleanor's defenses. When they broke apart, both had tears in their eyes. That night, Eleanor arrived home later than ever. Marcus was waiting for her in the living room, and his expression was the most dangerous she'd ever seen. "Where were you?" he asked in a dangerously calm voice. "At work, Marcus. I already explained it to you on the phone." Marcus slowly stood up from the couch, approaching her like a predator stalking its prey. "At work?" he repeated sarcastically. "For 5 hours after your normal schedule?" It was then that Marcus noticed the necklace. His eyes focused on the small golden key gleaming against Eleanor's skin, and his expression turned furious. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at the necklace. Eleanor instinctively brought her hand to her neck, covering the pendant. "It's just an accessory I bought today." "Liar," Marcus roared, grabbing her arm more tightly than necessary. "That necklace costs more than you earn in a month. Who gave it to you?" Eleanor tried to break free from his grasp, but Marcus tightened his grip. "Marcus, you're hurting me. Answer my question. Who gave you that necklace?" It was then that Eleanor saw something in Marcus's eyes she'd never seen before. A fury that went beyond jealousy, something that truly scared her. "Nobody gave it to me," he repeated, but his voice sounded less convincing. Marcus abruptly let go of her, pushing her back. Eleanor lost her balance and hit the dining room table, injuring her arm. "You're a liar and a bitch," Marcus yelled at her. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't realize what's going on?" Eleanor touched her arm where she'd hit herself, feeling a bruise forming. For the first time in 2 years, she saw Marcus for who he really was, a violent man who had been gradually escalating his aggression. "Marcus, I think you should calm down," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Calm down." Marcus laughed. "My girlfriend comes home with expensive jewelry she can't afford, lying to my face, and you want me to calm down?" He approached again, but this time Eleanor instinctively stepped back. "Don't leave me, Eleanor, we're dating. I have the right to know who you're sleeping with." "I'm not sleeping with anyone, Marcus," Eleanor said. And technically it was true, although she felt like she was betraying how she felt about Daniel. "Then take off that necklace right now and throw it in the trash," Marcus ordered. "No," Eleanor replied, more firmly than she had ever shown. The refusal surprised both Marcus and Eleanor. For 2 years, Eleanor had given in to all his demands, avoiding all confrontation, but something had changed. Daniel's words, the way he made her feel valued and respected, had given her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "What do you mean, no?" Marcus asked, clearly shocked by her resilience. "I'm not going to throw away my necklace because you tell me to," Eleanor said, surprising herself with her own courage. "And I'm not going to let you talk to me like that anymore." Marcus stood still for a moment, as if he couldn't process what he was hearing. Then his expression became more dangerous than ever. "Who do you think you are to talk to me like that?" he asked, taking a threatening step towards her. Eleanor felt fear, but she also felt something else, dignity. For the first time in a long time, she was respecting herself. "I'm a woman who deserves to be treated with respect," Eleanor said, Daniel's words echoing in her mind. Marcus raised his hand as if to strike her, and Eleanor closed her eyes, waiting for the impact. But the blow never came. When she opened her eyes, Marcus still had his hand raised, but there was something different about his expression, as if he'd realized how far he'd come. "This is your fault," he finally said, lowering his hand. "You're driving me crazy with your lies and your new attitude." With those words, Marcus grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "I'm going to my brother's house. When I get back tomorrow, I hope you're back to the Eleanor I knew, not this version who's acting too good for me." As the door closed behind him, Eleanor collapsed onto the couch, shaking from adrenaline and shock. She touched the necklace Daniel had given her, feeling the small key between her fingers. For the first time, she fully understood what he had meant. The key represented her freedom, her power to choose. And for the first time in years, Eleanor felt ready to use that key. The next day, Eleanor arrived at Daniel's house with a determination that he immediately noticed. There was something different about her posture, about the way she held her head high. "How are you?" Daniel asked, also noticing the barely visible bruise on her arm. Eleanor approached him without hesitation, taking his face in her hands. "I'm ready," she told him simply. "Ready for what?" Daniel asked, although his eyes already showed that he understood. "I'm ready to choose the life I deserve. I'm ready to choose you." Daniel lifted her in his arms, twirling her in the air as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Are you sure?" he asked her as he put her down, staring intently into her eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Eleanor replied. This time, when they kissed, there were no interruptions, no guilt, no fear. There was only pure love. Years of waiting finally rewarded. Daniel gently guided her to the living room sofa, his movements filled with reverence and tenderness. Every caress was a silent question, every kiss a promise. "Are you sure?" he asked her once more when they sat down together. Eleanor nodded, taking Daniel's hands in hers. For 23 years, she had been waiting to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel ready. And now, with Daniel, all those feelings combined into absolute certainty. "I love you, Daniel," she said, looking him straight in the eyes. "And I'm ready to show you just how much." Followed was the most beautiful experience of Eleanor's life. Daniel was infinitely patient, incredibly tender, making sure every moment was perfect for her. He whispered words of love in her ear, telling her how beautiful she was, how much he had waited for this moment. When she finally gave herself completely to him, Eleanor understood why she had waited so long. This wasn't just physical intimacy, it was the union of two souls who had been searching for each other for years. Afterward, lying on the couch with Eleanor in Daniel's arms, they both felt like the world had changed forever. "I don't regret waiting," Eleanor whispered against his chest. "Me neither," Daniel replied, kissing the top of her head. "It was worth every second of waiting." That afternoon, Eleanor made the most difficult and liberating decision of her life. She called Marcus and asked him to meet her at a neutral cafe to talk. When Marcus arrived, Eleanor was already sitting at a table near the window, with a serenity he had never seen in her. "Eleanor," Marcus began conspiratorially, "I've been thinking about what happened last night. Maybe I overreacted." But Eleanor raised a hand to stop him. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me without interrupting." Marcus sat down, clearly nervous by Eleanor's firm tone. "I've made a decision," Eleanor continued. "Our relationship is over." Marcus stood still for a moment, as if he hadn't processed the words. "What, Eleanor? You can't be serious. We all fight sometimes." "It's not about the fight last night, Marcus. It's about the 2 years of fighting, of making me feel small, of convincing me that my feelings didn't matter." Eleanor breathed deeply, feeling the strength Daniel had helped her find. "For 2 years, you convinced me I was the problem, that I was too sensitive, too demanding, too complicated. But now I realize I was never the problem." Marcus leaned forward, his expression turning desperate. "Eleanor, we can fix this. I can change. I promise I can be better." Eleanor shook her head sadly. "Marcus, you can't change because you don't believe anything needs to change. And I can't keep waiting for you to realize that I deserve respect and true love. This is for him, right? For your millionaire boss," Marcus said, his desperation turning to anger. "This is for me, Marcus. It's because I finally realized what I deserved." Eleanor stood up from the table, feeling freer than she had in years. "I wish you the best, Marcus. I hope you one day find a way to love someone without trying to control them." With those words, Eleanor walked out of the cafe, leaving behind not only Marcus but also the version of herself that had allowed herself to be mistreated for so long. 3 months later, Eleanor stood on the balcony of the apartment she now shared with Daniel, looking out at the city spread out before them. The small necklace with the golden key gleamed against her skin, but now it held a whole new meaning. Daniel came up behind her, putting his arms around her and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked her softly. "How strange fate is," Eleanor replied, leaning against him. "A year ago, she couldn't have imagined that one day she would be so happy." "I knew you would be one day," Daniel murmured against her hair. "I always knew that sweet little girl reading in the garden was destined for extraordinary things." Eleanor turned in his arms, looking at him with loving eyes. "Do you know what the most incredible thing is?" he asked her. That I didn't just find true love, I found myself." Daniel smiled, that smile that had made Eleanor fall in love since she was a child. "And I found the woman who is going to change my life forever." They kissed as the sun set over the city, and Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision. True love wasn't just about finding the right person. It was about becoming the right person to be loved. 6 months later, Eleanor received a call that would change her professional life forever. It was a client who had seen the work she had done on Daniel's house and wanted to hire her to design an entire chain of boutique hotels. "Daniel," Eleanor shouted excitedly when he came home that night. "You won't believe what happened today." When she told him about the offer, Daniel picked her up and spun her around in the air, just like he had done the day she chose to be with him. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his eyes shining with happiness. "You're going to take the design world by storm." But Eleanor shook her head, smiling. "No, Daniel. I've already achieved something much better than that." "What's better than realizing your professional dreams?" he asked, confused. "I conquered true love," Eleanor replied, "and the first conquered myself." A year later, Daniel proposed to her in the same place where they had first met when Eleanor was a child, Thomas's garden. He had transformed the space into a paradise of lights and flowers, with a path leading to where he was waiting, on one knee, with a ring that shone like the stars. "Eleanor Williams," Daniel said, his voice trembling with emotion, "since you were 11, I knew you were special, but I never imagined you would become the woman who would fulfill my soul in the most perfect way." He took her trembling hands in his own. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend for the rest of our lives?" Eleanor couldn't speak for a moment, overwhelmed with happiness. Finally, she nodded, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, Daniel. Yes, I want to marry you." When he slipped the ring onto her finger, Eleanor felt like her life had finally found its purpose. She hadn't just found the love of her life, she had found the bravest, most authentic version of herself. The wedding took place a year later in the same mansion where they had worked together, where they had fallen in love, where Eleanor had discovered her own strength. The ceremony was intimate, with only her closest family and dearest friends. Thomas, her older brother, walked her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, little one," he whispered as they walked. "Mom and Dad would be so happy to see you, so radiant." When Eleanor arrived where Daniel was waiting for her, they both knew this was the moment they'd been waiting for their entire lives. Not only the culmination of their love, but the beginning of a life built on mutual respect, true passion, and a deep understanding of what it means to love fearlessly. In her vows, Eleanor promised Daniel that she would never stop growing, dreaming, and being the courageous woman he had helped her discover. Daniel promised her that he would never stop cherishing her, protecting her light, loving her exactly as she was. 5 years later, Eleanor and Daniel sat on the same balcony where she had once pondered fate, but now they weren't alone. Sleeping in Eleanor's arms was her 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, while Daniel held his 6-month-old son, Michael. "Did you ever imagine we'd be this happy?" Eleanor asked Daniel, as they watched their children sleep. Daniel smiled, kissing Eleanor's forehead softly. "I knew that with you, anything was possible, but this surpasses even my wildest dreams." Eleanor looked at the small golden key necklace she was still wearing, now accompanied by her wedding ring and a new piece, a heart-shaped pendant Daniel had given her when Sophia was born. "That key you gave me," he said to Daniel, "really opened all the doors, didn't it?" Daniel nodded, taking her free hand and kissing her fingers. "It opened the door to your freedom, to your self-love, to our future together. But, Eleanor, the truth is, the key was always inside you. I just helped you find it." That night, after putting the children to bed, Eleanor and Daniel sat in their studio, now a home office, where Eleanor ran her thriving design business. The walls were covered with photos of her projects, but also of family moments, her wedding, the births of her children, family vacations. "You know what I love most about our story?" Eleanor asked Daniel as they reviewed plans for their next joint project. "A community center for women who had experienced domestic violence." "What do you like most?" Daniel replied, looking up from the documents. "It's not a story about a woman who needed rescuing," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "It's the story of a woman who learned to rescue herself, and, in the process, found someone who loved her exactly as she was." Daniel smiled, extending his hand toward her. "And it's the story of a man who thought he had everything in life, until he realized that all he really needed was the love of the right woman." They held hands across the desk, and Eleanor felt the same electricity she had felt the first time Daniel touched her, years ago in that house that was now her home. And so, after everything she'd been through, Eleanor understood that true love doesn't always come when we look for it, but it always comes when we're ready to receive it. That happiness isn't something someone else gives us, but something we build from the inside out. And that sometimes, the best love stories are those that teach us to love ourselves first. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. What country are you listening from? What part of this story moved you the most? Like, if you believe we all deserve a second chance at love? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that there's always hope. And subscribe for more stories that touch your soul. If you made it to the end, leave in the comments what you liked most about this story, or if you relate to it in any way.